crown like cold winter light, scroll in hand, seven seals, every word cuts and heals.
We'll be up in about 30 seconds. Everybody hit that like, share the show.
Red horse screams, hooves like drums, sword raised high, kingdoms come, peace unstitched by a single roar. I hear thunder at my door, wars and rumors of wars, smoking like a curse in the dark. Every headline, every
All right, we should be live on Instagram now. Full up everywhere else. Substack's up. Excellent. Facebook, YouTube's doing all right, I think.
All the old world shakes with our fears. Black horse ways, bread and bone, steel stilled hard, iron stone. Measure grain by a dying sun, silver short for everyone. Pale horse waits, eyes like ash, graves awake.
About 1 minute.
Tombs unlatched, Hades hangs on a trailing chain. Every pole spells your name. Wars and rumors of wars, spoken like a curse in the dark. Every headline, every scar's another cracked heart in the arc. Wars.
All right, let's get straight to this, if we could. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Good morning. Hit the like, share the show as you do. The words we now know are as apocryphal and yet true. Happy Monday. These are the Mondayest of Mondays I think we've had in quite some time. I have to say that I caught our usual gang of maggot, I guess, media professionals. I'll give them some credit for that this morning, and they seem to all be leaning into my rather ironic title song, Wars and Rumors of Wars, right now, because I don't think they have actually another way of articulating geopolitical difficulties in the context of just human beings living on a planet, acting as human beings are wont to do. I want to welcome, if I could, our first guest to the show. Hold on, Doran, I'm going to put you in this little window right here. It takes 1 second. Let's see, there we go. And it should be all right. We forgive you for not having a tie on. It is a tie-free show. Doran Kemple, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Excellent. Thank you for having me, Hal.
So, and I appreciate Andrea putting us together. I'm relatively unfamiliar with your background, but in terms of the current unpleasantness, as the CIA would put it, I think that's one of my favorite phrases from pop culture, what we know of the CIA anyways. All wars are referred to as the current unpleasantness, because there will always be one kind of after it, and that human beings kind of shake this stuff down. And right off the top, let's dive into your just kind of current take on the status direction of the Iran war, Israel's participation in it, and whether this is directly linked to do you think the hinge point was October 7th forward, that there was a decision made in the same way that I would argue that Yahya Sinwar said that he'd made the decision after Trump recognized the Golan Heights, that this was the end of the end, and therefore all bets are off, it's time to play rope-a-dope, all that storyline? Or the PNAC decision in 1995 by some American conservatives, aligned with a Christian group who at one point, I think we're going to put a nuke under the Temple on the Mount to call Jesus' bluff, like that kind of level of insanity. I feel like this has been going on as a Gen Xer my entire life, so there's no real genesis point. So the idea of it ending also seems nearly impossible as well. So that's a lot to jump into right out of the gate, but primarily, where do you think we are, and where do you think this goes in the short term, if there is a short term?
Thank you, Hal. First, let's contextualize my comments on behalf of your comments, on
Yeah,
behalf of your audience, excuse me. So,
yeah,
first of all, I'm a US citizen speaking to you out of Miami. My
yeah.
children are American. Number two, I'm a former IDF deputy commander of a special operations unit that operates undercover. This is very important in order to understand a very important and not enough spoken about dimension of the conflict or the campaign. There's a
Hmm.
lot that's going on underneath the surface that we don't talk about. That's a dimension that I can explore.
Great.
Thirdly, and very importantly, I'm going to be less useful for you talking about the past and where did people start or where did people make certain decisions. I'll try and offer a strategic perspective.
Great.
If you're an American, if you're Iranian, if you're Israeli, and what I think is going on, I'll try to be very objective and empathetic, which are the two very important tools of a strategist, right? It doesn't really matter how we feel. The question is,
Right.
what are the objectives? And you need to
And
be
can they be
objective about
achieved?
what's going
Right.
on, and empathetic to the other party as well. So, with that, let me
Great.
address your question. From the perspective of the United States and Israel, but mainly from the perspective of the United States, Iran plays for the Russian Chinese bloc. Let's start with that.
Right.
That's the bigger chess game here. And if we don't understand that, it's going to be very hard to understand what are the real interests of the parties. From the perspective of the United States, there is a separation of us, the West, the United States, from China, and Iran plays a kinetic role in the overall Chinese-Russian game plan. In other words, China and Russia doesn't want a confrontation with the United States. They don't want a physical kinetic confrontation. So they need somebody like Iran that has the ability to develop technologies like ballistic missiles, like nuclear weapons, a party that has enough money via the oil in order to activate what we, the Westerners, call terrorist organizations.
Mhm.
Notice I'm trying to be objective. It doesn't really
Understood.
matter what we call them. It's clear that these are different parties. We call them Hamas and Houthis and Hezbollah. And what they can do is they can fire rockets and they can apply what we call terrorism. Iran plays that role on behalf of China and Russia. And our belief should be that once they reach a certain level of military capability, let's call it nuclear arms,
Hmm.
then they basically reach impunity.
Hmm.
And then we can no longer touch them, and they're going to be the force that the Chinese and the Russians apply against us. Let's start with that. Now,
Sure.
with that being a working assumption that your audience may or may not accept, let's ask ourselves what could be the aims of this war? And I believe that there could be two aims: a tactical limited aim, which is basically the eradication of the military capabilities, only military capabilities of Iran, such that we postpone, from our perspective, the West perspective, this cancer. I find that a useful metaphor because we
Hmm.
talk a lot about the fact whether the risk is imminent or not. We can talk about what
Sure.
imminency means. But one aim is to postpone the capabilities of Iran by 5 years. That means that we destroy all of their military infrastructure. But 5 years from now, given that they have oil and given that they have China and Russia helping them, they're going to be at the same place exactly. But at any point in time, the president and the US can say, we've accomplished that goal. By the way, that goal is inevitable.
Hmm.
We, the United States, have the military power to completely destroy their military capabilities. It's a matter of a few more weeks and we're done. The second goal, that is a long term goal, is basically switch Iran from working for the Chinese or the Russians to supporting us. The narrative is that the Iranian people have chosen democracy, that's us, the West, over tyranny. That's the IRGC, China, Russia.
Yeah.
In order to accomplish that, what you need is a more complicated strategy that includes a regime change. And now let me address what I think it takes to constitute or to realize a regime change. And
Great.
there are a few possible strategies. Strategy number one, first of all, am I headed in the direction that you wanted me?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
this
absolutely. I'll have some tactical additives that I will put into the mix as well. But please feel free to continue on this point. And I think you're heading in a direction that I've spoken of before. So this makes sense. Yeah.
terrific? So the most happy, or let's call it a happy path
Hmm.
is as follows. As we all understand, there are undercover forces on the ground already. So when we say that there are no forces on the ground, what we mean is that there are no forces that wear standard uniform on the ground. But the Mossad, the
Right.
CIA, and special military units that operate undercover. In other words, they wear civilian clothes, or maybe they look like Iranian military.
Hmm.
It could be that you have some units that operate right now in Iran and they wear IRGC uniforms. That's what
Or
you and I
police
would have
officers.
done.
Right.
Yeah, or
Yep.
police officers, exactly. In other words, these are special forces. Typically, we don't talk much about that.
Hmm.
Those forces have the role to eradicate the first, the second, and the third level of leadership in the regime and the IRGC, getting them to the point that they're no longer organized, they can't basically formulate an attack or strategy, etc. And then we should assume that given that they've had 10 to 20 years to establish the foundation, the intelligence foundation, whether these are agents that work for you, whether these are listening devices, and visual devices, they're able to lead or to call some friendly general. I'm calling him a friendly general. He may not be a general. Maybe he's the spokesperson for the parliament.
Right.
Doesn't matter. He's some leader on the other side who's on our payroll or is friendly to us. And at some point in time, we tell him now is the time. We've eradicated whoever is going to stand up to you to a point where you can start the so called uprising.
Hmm.
At some point in time, that will start. The question is if it can start completely without uniformed forces on the ground. I'm going to address this question in a minute because I do already think that the Straits of Hormuz require uniformed U.S. Forces
I
on
think
the
the White
ground.
House has made that determination a long time ago, even if they're not admitting to it. And I certainly think that's what Dan Kane is recommending, if not our partners in the UAE. I mean, especially the UAE and Saudi Arabia, I would argue, because they hinge on it and they have the other side of the strait. So,
Right, and let me stay on that point, which I think is very important. There is the state of mind that all these countries in the Middle East have before the war starts, and there's where they are now,
hmm.
having had the Iranians fire missiles at them, and having experienced that, and now having experienced the fact that the Straits of Hormuz are stuck. And I think that what we're hearing from Saudi Arabia, which probably represents everybody else, now that we are where we are, in other words, think about it, it's our state of mind about marriage before we're married and after we have kids. It's a completely different state of mind.
Right.
Now Saudi Arabia is telling us, you've started it, now let's finish it. We're already deep enough. We do not go back without breaking this concern that we have about Strait of Hormuz. By the way, Saudi Arabia, better than everybody else, can move all of their 7 million barrels of oil to the Red Sea through what is called the Petro Pipe, and from there north through the Suez and another pipe to the Mediterranean. So they're okay, but then there's another 13 million barrels that are still not able to move out.
Hmm.
So I believe, excuse me, that we're at a point where we're going to deploy ground forces in order to free up the Straits of Hormuz. And once we've done that, I think that it's less likely that the president, Trump,
Right.
will decide that this is over just with a tactical aim. And he's going to allow for the clandestine undercover forces to continue eradicating the leadership of the IRGC and the regime and allow for this friendly general or friendly leader to lead. Now, if that cannot be achieved without additional forces, here's second level. So what I'm saying is that level number one is only undercover forces, but you need to open the Straits of Hormuz with ground forces. Second level is you now need to use Delta SEAL type of forces. They don't operate undercover, but they're mighty forces, and they're going to engage and disengage. In other words, you're going to bring them in order to address some tactical goals in support of the uprising, but they're not going to stay there for months. That's not what they do. They do more of what we saw in Venezuela. In and out strategic goal, I see that's happening. Hopefully, we don't get to a point where we need Marines on the ground in Iran for 3 or 6 months. That'll be expensive, and we don't want that. But I think that we're at a point whereby if we want to go all the way and we need to switch the regime, we might need even to go to level 3. So level 1, just to repeat, is done with undercover capabilities. Let's understand what that means. There's nobody in Iran right now who's a leader who's alive without the CIA and the Mossad deciding that he's going to be alive. So if there's a leader who says, I'm now speaking for the Iranians, and that leader is alive for a week and he's visible, that means that somebody decided that he's allowed to live. And then we need to ask ourselves, as skeptical members of the audience, why is the US okay with this person being alive? But nobody there can be alive if he's a leader without the Mossad and the CIA deciding, because they have forces on the ground that deliver intel, Hal, to F-15s in the air at the level of target number 14 is in building number 4, room number 5. And then within 4 minutes, a missile enters the window. It's that level of intel. So
Right.
nobody operates with impunity right now in Iran. Back to you.
So yeah, excellent. A bunch of points there. This is categorically, there is a tactical, like you were saying, a tactical or strategic desire, and then an overall long-term desire that is geopolitical. That that is the kind of thing that's juggling back and forth, and that's where a split between the United States and Israel may exist, in that America can get its tactical and strategic goals finished a lot easier than Israel can because of physical proximity, quite frankly, and that timeline is much more cushion for the United States than it is for Israel. It may be a 5-year timeline to get them back to tactically being able to strike Israel. That means a 10-year or 12 or 15-year timeline to strike the United States. So our buffer, our cushion between FA and FO is wider than, I would argue, Israel's is. And so in this circumstance, the desire for a regime change may be lighter in the United States than it is in Israel. And at a certain point in tactically what the Iranians would look like, to be completely fair, on their own defense, is that if they're looking at, in the future, our only salvation will be a nuclear bomb, that if they reach that tipping point, the rest of their munitions, drones, and all that kind of stuff becomes window dressing to the goal to ultimately have the same protection, say, North Korea has, right? So you set them on that path, which means the only way to get them off that path is regime change for Israel's sake. There is a tipping point to which, and whether we've crossed that or not, I think is the most debatable gray area that we're in. But once you start this, and I think it's why a lot of presidents have been, want not to, is because once you start ripping this Band-Aid off, this is everything that's festering underneath of it, and that there is no, you pass the section of half measures very quickly. And so whether Israel wanted this, or whether the United States wanted this, or whether this is a tactical failure by the intelligence inside, Donald Trump or Bibi Netanyahu's head, or this is just a couple of guys seeking out a goal, and there's always a plan underneath in the military. The Pentagon has a plan for everything. So I'm sure does the IDF, that if there was an attack just from Lebanon and that was the primary starter instead of October 7th, they would have had a plan for what the sprawl would be and how to deal with the rise in there. And if it had come from Syria, they would have had another plan for that. We do the same thing. We're not short of tactical and strategic answers. As Donald Trump showed our Iran plan to Mark Meadows' biographer on that recording that from Mar-a-Lago in the classified documents case. So we have the plans for that. It's a matter of, do you crack the seal on any of these? When it comes to Iran, we are very fast approaching, or already there, where if we decapitate the leadership to a certain extent where there's no backup, then clearly there is a plan C for them, which is, if you're not getting orders from the head of the IRGC or the guy up the train, here's your 10 targets, hit them, it's all over. And the United States has had that. Anybody who's seen the movie War Games knows that the U.S. has had a version of that for our nuclear capabilities, but we also have one tactically on the ground. And I'm sure that the IDF has something similar as well, that if Tel Aviv was wiped out and they couldn't reach anything, the generals, the commanders, the captains, the lieutenants on each of these areas would go, all right, this is what we do from this point on, boys, because we don't have it. Everybody else is gone. The Iranians have to have a similar plan. So this is why you don't tear off this Band-Aid unless you're ready to go, which is my argument why it's already at plan see on our side that your third option, that we're going to have boots on the ground on at the very least the eastern side of Hormuz, and very possibly I doubt Karg Island, but I wouldn't doubt some part of western Iran as a squeeze point near the Pakistani border, with some threats or cajoling of the Pakistanis to try and get them on board, so that tactically there's a squeeze going on, and what you will see is a march towards Tehran, or whether they stay in, whether it's drop in, drop out, paratrooper kind of situations where they hit and evacuate with IDF forces working together, or whether it's ground troops is anybody's guess at this point, because I don't know that there's a clear plan. But we're at that stage already, and that's because you can't start this without jumping in. You can't, that I don't think there was ever a situation where we did even what happened last year without regime change being beyond a goal, a responsibility at this point, if that makes sense. And I don't mean that America has the responsibility, or Israel does, to wipe out regimes and clean up the world. I mean legitimately that if you don't want this threat to come back in the worst way possible, the same people can't be running the country. It just can't. I don't know when that was, past week one, past the last year, one of those points, whether it's irresponsible for the United States, it would be to go through with this. It would be irresponsible for the leadership of Israel at this point to not go through with it. I would argue the same is true of the Saudis and the UAE. Once this happens, they've now got a bullseye on their back. They might have, I think it was MBS who made the final call to Trump saying it's okay with us if you hit Iran. It wasn't Netanyahu, like everybody says, whispering in his ear like a Manchurian candidate. He was waiting for the pass from his Live Golf partners to say this is okay. And partly that's because they've had Iran hanging over their heads as much or more than Israel financially. There's a glass ceiling on what Dubai and Abu Dhabi can become as long as the Shia threat is right across the water. So once you uncap this is Pandora's box. And, and whether Trump realizes that's what he did or not, for Israel, it's abundantly clear. And for the Saudis and for the UAE, it's abundantly clear, Bahrain and Kuwait, that once this starts, it doesn't stop until it's over. So I don't see a tactical or strategic situation where you can leave any version of this regime in place like it's Venezuela and call it a day, because they are characteristically different organizations and belief systems. One is religious, the other is economic and cartel based. It's transactional, which is not what the Ayatollah system, the mullahs, are based on. It's just a totally different circumstance. So I don't see those. I think those tactical options vanished the minute they cracked the seal on this. I really do.
Yeah. So you made a lot of great points. Let me just go over
Sure.
them and
Please.
make sure that I understand. But I think very similar to you. First of all, I think that the metaphor of ripping the Band-Aid is excellent. And we don't really know, but my assumption is that early in the war, there were these two options. Number one is just eradicate them militarily, push them out 5 years, and then the president, Trump, that is, in the administration, can say, we've accomplished our goal, we've succeeded, and we still have 7 months to get the midterm elections in order.
Right.
I thought that was an option at the beginning. There was the other option, and they could have seen how it works, how easy it is to create this regime change, and how quickly can they start this, let's call it the uprising. I do agree with you that once they ripped the Band-Aid and the Iranians fired missiles at their neighbors, we now see that the whole Middle East, literally the whole Middle East, is okay with the US taking care of that. And they're actually applauding. Let's finish this now that we have started. So I think that right now, the option of saying we're done after just eradicating the military, I think that is less likely. I agree with you completely about that.
Yeah, that ship has sailed, no pun intended. Right.
Yes. And now that has happened, we're getting to the second part of your view or thesis, and that is, how deeply are we willing to dig in order to get it done, with the clock ticking on the midterm elections? And of course, these are American men and women there. And at the end of the day, democracies don't have patience for these types of call it campaigns. But I think that from the perspective of the US, and you've juxtaposed the US and Israel, I agree with you that if Iran starts misbehaving 5 years from now, the Israelis are going to feel it much earlier than the Americans. But long term, the United States needs to control the energy market. There is a reason why we were in Venezuela, and there's a reason why we're in the Middle East right now. And the rest of the Middle East is very much supportive of the United States. And notice, by the way, most of the oil that goes through the Straits of Hormuz goes to China.
Mhm.
So China needs that oil more than the United States. We don't need any oil that's coming out of the Straits of Hormuz. China, India, Japan, South
Yeah, I
Korea, those are the players.
let me put a pin in that one for just 1 second. In that we don't need the actual material stuff, but if it causes the price to go up, that is a uniform price because we do not have nationalized oil in the United States, and so our oil that goes to market is at market price. Our companies would be in violation of their fiduciary duties to their investors if they didn't raise it to $115 right now, even though you're pouring it into a container next door. That doesn't matter in terms of that, and that's Trump's output. I do think it is more of a geopolitical impact on China in that you've got China. Most people don't know this, I don't suppose, but China gets 80% of their energy from outside of the country and about 80 to 85% of their food. Their arable land has been devastated by years of just toxicity. Their coal mines, after a major storm system a couple of years ago, maybe 6 years ago, turned into giant black pools and seeped coal sleuth and garbage into their aquifers that toxify their water. They need water purification plants on the level of Middle Eastern desalination plants to have clean drinking water in the major metropolitan areas. It is very energy intensive and it is very expensive and it is eaten into their GDP in a way that I don't think people respect. They also have a demographic problem that is falling off a cliff, not unlike what's happening in Russia. And so they've got, in some cases, bigger fish to fry than solving Iran's problems in this situation, which has created another reason why this is a tipping point where you have an opportunity to decapitate the regime and get rid of them that may not have existed 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, simply because Iran, had these partners were more important. Russia was not bogged down in Ukraine. China was not fighting all of these, self-inflicted wounds that have been festering for quite some time. So Iran is, uniquely not unlike, I guess, the Wagner partnerships in Africa, where certain militia groups have fallen apart, and where Sudan and other countries have burst into flames because Russia used to back one side, and now they're busy fighting in Ukraine, losing 1,000,002 in a war of choice that should have taken 6 days, that kind of stuff. So Iran has fewer, even though definitely China is probably their primary financial partner and Russia is their conduit. That's probably how they get their money from China in payment for the oil. It goes through Russia and comes back there because Donald Trump will let that slide. So, whatever he believes is hard to break down because his brain is cottage cheese right now. But the issue that we have is that there's an opportunistic aspect of this tactical and strategic reality, and then there is a realistic version of this tactical and strategic responsibility on the IDF's part, on Israel's part, on the United States' part, that Iran is genuinely a threat, and they're particularly weak, and their backup partners are on their heels right now on a bunch of different levels, and they can give some help. Obviously, Russia's been helping Iran, spot our troops and target them, which I guess, again, our president is okay with, which is bizarre. But that's minor compared to the support they could. Their own Shahed factory in Russia that the Iranians helped them build was hit by Ukrainian drones and destroyed, I want to say 3 weeks ago, as a favor from Zelensky in case they decided to send any of them back down to Iran. So this unique situation and all of these factors being at play, you can see why the generals would come and go, much to your point about lasering targets, going, he's on this rooftop at this time. We've got eyes on him exactly here. He just arrived. You've got 10 minutes. The missile's 4 minutes away. We can hit this very strategic strike, and we might not get another chance, right? Look at Osama bin Laden, Soleimani, many of the others that have been struck this way. The same thing is true of the entire regime right now, is that they are on their heels in a way, and I'm sure the generals are coming in there going, Mr. President, you're nobody, not just you, nobody's going to get another shot like this at toppling this regime, and they haven't had one before. Or maybe they're blowing smoke up his ass and saying they did. They just blew it probably just to get him motivated to do it. So again, I think once that bombing happened last year, the tactical option part is became PR and went right out the window. And whether it was ours or Israel's or as the impetus, it doesn't matter. They decided it's all in now. And so everything they're telling us about maybe boots on the ground, maybe the Armada's there to do this stuff, maybe we're going to we have these options. I think that deck has been cleared. I think they're cracking the seal on Plan C and just moving straight to that point. Because I don't see and sorry to filibuster, but I don't see another tactical response that is responsible to the security needs of Israel, the United States, and the Middle East at this point, because that Band-Aid has been ripped off. There is no point where the third or fourth Ayatollah is going to go, okay, I tap out. We're going to, play nice and we'll be Shia light for the rest of the millennia. And
that sentence of yours, that should be the headline on all the news. Because you just summarized. You said, given where we are right now, I don't see any solution but a strategic solution. There needs to be a regime change, and we're in right now. I think that's what you've said.
It's just the truth of it, and it's not what it's why I would have avoided this in the first place. I think it's, I think it's, tactically and strategically, long term. I think our partners in the Middle East are more than happy to let Israel and the United States do this because we're going to have the big bullseye on our back for the next 20 years for any blowback that comes. The next Osama bin Laden is being born or radicalized right now based on this war, and he won't be looking necessarily to the Saudis or the UAE or blowing up something in Qatar or Bahrain directly. He'll be focusing on downtown Manhattan, Los Angeles, or Seattle or something like that, or a data center or some spot in Montana they see as a target. And that's, I think those partners in that area are more than comfortable with us carrying the bullseye or Israel carrying the bullseye. It's been there for a long time. And so they'll sit back. Yeah, you guys go ahead. Yeah, you're right. It's time. We won't stop you, which we might have had to pretend we were before, but we're not joining you, especially boots on the ground and that kind of stuff. I think there may be some tactical helicopter support or transport stuff from UAE or Saudi Arabia because of the Houthis, mainly because they can say direct threat from a proxy of Iran's and use that as an excuse. Like, we're not really in this, but we're dealing with these guys, right? But that's why I think a lot of presidents and perhaps other leaders of Israel have been, reticent to do this up till now, because once you start it, you eliminate all the other options immediately. It's just the truth.
And those are democracies, and these leaders of democracies need to be elected. So they always need to ask themselves, Al, if I take upon myself this adventure, will I benefit from it as a leader? Unfortunately, that's the way that democracies run. And something has changed in the calculus. We can get into what has changed. But here we are in a completely new geometry. And I agree with you completely that now everybody's behind taking care of this strategically. By the way, interestingly, just to add to some of your points, notice that the Chinese have not fought a war in 40 years since their
Vietnam
War, etc. And they've not shown any capability. If you were a fan of a basketball or a football team that hasn't played any games in 40 years, how confident would you be? And by the way, Xi just purged some of his generals. So looking at what the Russians have just experienced
all
in
of
Ukraine,
them.
yes.
Yeah.
And he's looking at Putin. Putin also thought that he's in a good spot when we started the war in Ukraine. If he knew then what he knows now, I'm not sure he would start this war. He probably understands that the military that he has is very far from the military that we have that hovers over Iran right now. So I
Yeah.
don't think, supporting your point, that this is a great opportunity. If you wanted to do this, which is a different question, but if you want to do this, this is the time to do it. Russia is clogged in Ukraine, and I don't think that Chinese want to mess with the United States. And what the United States is actually doing in Venezuela and now in the Middle East is controlling the energy market. By the
Right.
way, if we control Karg Island is where the oil comes from Iran. 80% of Iranian oil goes to China. So if we just control Karg Island, irrespectively of what else we do in Iran, we now basically control the fuel that is headed to China, which is very important. Now, I don't think that we want a war with China, and I don't think the Chinese want a war with us, but there is competition here. And in this market, there are going to be applications of kinetic power. And if we take Iran off the field, so to speak, off the chessboard, I think we're going
Right.
to be in a safer world. One more point, Al, to reference to the next bin Laden that may be born right now, is being raised right now. Interestingly, when 9/11 occurred, and you asked me how many of these are we going to see in the next 25 years, because it has been 25 years,
Hmm.
I said then that we're going to see a few. Maybe not at the magnitude of 9/11, but I assume that we're going to see more of those. And surprisingly, we haven't. And there's a reason why we haven't, and we need to give a lot of credit to the US military, to the intel apparatus, and to all of our partners in the Middle East, including Israel, because we apply a lot of pressure on all of those players there, number one. Number two, look at Iraq for a second. Iraq used to have the same dreams and the same narrative that Iran does. They had ballistic missiles, and everybody was talking about the fact that they want nuclear weapons.
Right.
Iraq is a non-player. There's nothing there other than a few oil pumps that are managed by BP, Exxon, and Occidental. The same thing can happen to Iran. So when we think about all the levels of harm or effort that can get us to a regime change, that would be the fourth level. In other words, not stop at eradicating the military infrastructure, but make this country into a desert economically. And the only thing that stays in Iran are just the oil wells that are being pumped, managed by the US through, or US companies or Western companies, and pump the oil through Karg Island out. Hopefully, we don't get there, because this is very devastating for the Iranian people. 80% of them want to be part of the West. But let's just remember two things in response to what you said. Number one is there wasn't another 9/11, and there's a reason for that. We are heavily invested in this particular area, and US Intel and our partners Intel are sitting very tight on everything that is going on there. Secondly, if we wanted to, and I'm not recommending that, but whoever is showing all the options to the president should show this option, and that is switch from only hitting military targets to hitting all the rest of the targets. And then Iran becomes like Iraq, but with no occupation. You just break it completely, and you have BP, Exxon, and Occidental mine the oil through Karg Island, and you continue controlling the Straits of Hormuz. Just another scenario for you.
Yeah, no, okay. So a lot to carve off there. And again, I want to make clear to our chat and everybody that you and I are talking about the strategic and tactical realities of this circumstance and what the people that are making these decisions are doing right now. You and I, neither one of us can make the phone call and make either of these things happen, but people need to be informed as to the kind of decisions that are being made and the limitations on those decisions. There are ways out that the general public watching the news might go, well, why don't we do this, or why don't we do this, or how come we can't do this, or whatever. Those have already been cleared off the table as a possibility in the deciding halls previously. The argument about how early is more academic and philosophical, and I would argue, like I said, if whatever you started last year in terms of the U.S. bombing their nuclear sites, that was never going to be a one-off. I would argue, because it was so large, it was such a big hit inside the country, and it would obviously lead to proxy attacks that Iran would have to either legitimately or to save face, or these kind of like tacit ones. It would still snowball into other stuff where the U.S. we might lose people in a base, or allies might get killed or something like that, which would require another response from this. So creating a slow rolling snowball that, and you could argue that that's exactly what did happen. Beyond Trump, I don't think being an honest broker in the peace process, or the idea that we were going to have another treaty, because by all measures he's trying to get back to the JCPOA, but just tack his name on top of it, and we're in this because of that specifically. But in terms of that categorically, how you kind of kneecap the Khomeini and the mullahs in particular, so that there can be a more Jordanian system inside Iran, which I think is from not just Israel's standpoint, but from everybody else in the Middle East. The goal has been, through by hook or by crook, to eventually get Iran to a more Jordanian system, whether it's an actual monarchy, or a Shah-like system, or it becomes a mild dictatorship based on some sort of religious belief, but not radical clerics running the whole thing from a very, incendiary point of view, sort of end timers, which is how they're viewed by and large, in the same way that the Saudis are viewed as hillbillies by the rest of the Middle East too. We forget there are personalities in this world, but that seems to be the generalized goal of the entire Middle East right now. And again, I think they're more than happy that the U.S. and Israel will have the target on our back if it goes sideways. But once it started, it's got to keep going this way. For whatever 2-week, 4-week thing that they're bounding about to try and either quell fears in the United States politically leading into the midterms, or quite frankly, to manipulate the stock market and the oil market so that Howard Nutlick and all these guys can buy the dip every 2 days, which I think is closer to the truth, quite frankly, because they know the timeline and we don't, so they can use that as a market manipulation tool and make themselves very rich during this process. And I don't think they're the kind of people who would let that slide. The reality is that there's a parity of unfortunate responsibility on behalf of the Israelis and some military leaders in the United States that realize that if Donald Trump actually was stupid enough to make this decision, once he's done it, it's done. And our only safe point is through this, because the Winston Churchill idea, if you're going through hell, keep going, right? And I think that's how they're viewing it. And so what we hear from our spokespeople about maybe 2 weeks, it's almost over, I'm going to call it off tomorrow, maybe next week, it's probably going to be 6 weeks, when in reality they budgeted for 6 months at the very least. And Donald Trump could just as well benefit in his own mind from being a war president during the midterms and using the threat of terrorism to drive up his base and make sure they show up at the polls, is just as much a reality right now as he gets out and his base forgets about it and they're fine and they vote in the fall. And I think we're leaning towards, again, on a political, tactical, and strategic reality, he's much closer to, I'm a wartime president, you don't change horses midstream during the midterms, a la George W. Bush, than you guys, we won, it's over. That we finished that in, at the end of March. That's old news, the Iran war. And I don't know whether they feel they've reached that junction point. I don't know if they've legitimately, there's any truth to either side of it. I think he's screwed either way, personally, because there's too many other factors. But again, for all of, Israel gets vilified in this, and certainly Netanyahu has done his best to try and keep that ball in the air. But there is an unfortunate circumstance where the Israeli military, the Knesset, everybody there has got to be under the impression that if we let these guys stand, they're going to have a grudge and a budget, because Trump's going to have to drop the sanctions entirely on them for a rebuild or some sort of payoff. So they're going to fund that stuff. If they were doing it before, they're going to do it even worse. And until they get a nuke, they're not going to stop, and it's going to end up in Tel Aviv. That's, I'm sure, how they're thinking right now. And I don't imagine that if I was, 100 miles, if I was as far away from Iran as they are, as I am from, say, I don't know, Kansas, um, the range of missiles and all that stuff would be a much higher factor in my mind than if I was across the ocean.
Right. I think that the notion of immediacy plays a significant psychological role in the minds of people. So if you have fourth stage cancer, it's immediate and you're sure that you need to do something about it, but you should have the same calculus even if it's stage one cancer. Just a
Right.
matter of time, but it's as inevitable. So the Israelis, if you're an Israeli, you probably say to yourself, that if the Iranian threat is not removed, then 10 years from now, Israel is not livable, right? If you're a normal parent, why would you want your kids in Israel under those circumstances? That should be their view. And for that reason, I think that as a country, they're probably possess more resolve and there's more consensus around that.
Mhm.
We as Americans have different views about that, but there are definitely people who say, Iran is a major risk. They're going to be playing for the Russians and the Chinese. If we don't take care of it now, then 5 or 10 years from now, it's not going to be manageable. So it's just different time leg, but the same conviction, I
I
assume, by some of the
Right.
generals that we need to take care of it now. And as you've said earlier, there's never been a better opportunity. Now, whether you or I would have done it or not is one question that we haven't discussed. But now that we are where we are, we both believe, and to your audience, it's not that we think that this is what should happen. We're not talking about what's good or bad. We're just saying these are the chess pieces on the board.
Right.
And given who the players are, we think that this is how it's going to play out. And we believe
Exactly.
that it's a point where you've ripped the band aid, great metaphor. And right now they're going to see it through,
Mhm.
even through the elections, in your
Yeah,
view,
I
which
don't.
is an astute
Yeah,
observation.
I don't think the other factors matter as much as this part of it. I also think that the 10-year window idea that Israel and the United States are dealing with in terms of a built back Iran and all this kind of stuff is also shifting drastically due to we were headed into before all this started and we've got $115 a barrel oil. I called it, during the last election, but the next president, whether it was Harris or Trump, was going to be dealing with an oil glut, that there is more oil being produced than is needed in the world, period. And the only reason the price is high right now is because the source is backed up for a while. But even through the resourcing of, I think right now the Saudis are getting 7 million barrels a day through their pipeline that used to do 3. And so they're effectively making up for whatever loss they would have sent through the strait. And over time, I think as a backup, no matter what happens, in fear of what happens in the future if this goes again, the goal should be for the other oil companies in and the countries that rely on oil as their primary source of finance in the Middle East is to go out over land and avoid the strait entirely. Is it cheaper to send boats? Yes, technically, but not if you have to do this every 6 years or every 10 years or every 12 years. That cost price drops immense. The return on investment drops immensely when that could be stopped at any point. Your pipeline is your pipeline, your land is your land, and you can have partnerships that are relatively impenetrable, and nobody's going to blow up your pipeline. If it goes through friendly countries. So I think there's a direction over the next 5 to 10 years that is also structurally what's going on. And the Saudis have learned, that if they can circumvent the Houthis for the most part and not worry about it, go out through a port that is less, like vulnerable to their attacks. The same thing can be true of Kuwait and Bahrain and Qatar, perhaps with LNG and that kind of stuff, and just start building those pipelines out that way, avoiding so that the Strait of Hormuz is really only for Iranian oil. So what purpose does it have other than that? And then shipping and what effectively were the Abraham Accords were really just the reality of we reached peak oil probably 15 years ago. We're on the downslope, not because of supply, but because the rest of the world is over it. Europe, the United States, and China are all moving towards electric vehicles. We're looking at the electrification of all consumer vehicles within the next 15 to 20 years, period, no matter what. The shift in that alone will drop the need for oil in the world by about 5 million barrels a day. That's devastating to the oil industry. And so if your country has the resource curse of being, of oil is the only thing you got, this includes the Saudis. Like you could tell, that's why Saudis and the UAE have moved towards this sort of FinSec tourism model. Project 2030 and Project 2040 is them trying to build a new pyramid where the population of the world will come and visit it and point at it and look and buy a $7 sandwich and pay for their country by coming and seeing this thing. The Saudis have Mecca and Medina, so they got 1 billion Muslims that have to make the Hajj at some point. So they're counting on that financially as the thing that will ultimately keep their country afloat once we move past oil. And the reality is that this is another aspect of this, is that the U.S. and Israel can look to, if we can put them on their heels, Iran on their heels for 5 years or 8 years, something like that. By the time they get on their feet, it will be a non-issue because oil itself will not garner the same amount of value that it had before. You can't fuel an entire country, pardon the pun, on just oil and gas. And I think that's another factor as to why they think, why now? That they're doing this, because do this in 2000 and in 10 years you can still rebuild with the oil revenues that will come in because there was no major change, right? We were 2 years into Tesla being a moderate company and electric cars being a novelty item. Now that's different. And the United States, whether Trump likes it or not, is moving towards an electrification of the consumer vehicles and a good portion of shipping. And most of Europe is doing the exact same thing. Canada's certainly doing it. They just made a deal with China about BYD vehicles, which I think is a mistake because they don't call them burn your driveway for nothing. But once the solid state batteries show up, it's not going to matter. And we're 3 years away from mass consumer adoption of that. The game changes entirely. So if you're an oil-rich country, you're screwed in about 5 to 10 years or less, if not already. And this is just a moment to like grab as much money as you can while the price is high. So there are all these reasons why, whether Trump decided to or not, there were people around him that were going to be like elbowing him, like, get it, do this now. That wasn't just Netanyahu going, kill them, they're going to kill us. That's definitely a part of it. That is absolutely a part of it. But it's always been a part of it. We've heard this story. People make these tapes of these videos of Netanyahu talking about how far away they are from a nuclear weapon, 2 months, 5 months, 2 weeks, whatever. He's been saying it forever because it's kind of been true forever. And each time they get close to it, we've done something to try and flick that away. Sanctions, other stuff, overspinning their
scientists.
Yeah, right. The United States famously, one of our hacker groups hacked into the Iranian nuclear system, overspun their centrifuges and basically broke all the gear, destroyed it internally, and then had all the computers in the place play Thunderstruck by AC/DC before they shut the power on the place. It's one of the more famous American cyber attacks that we did, particularly. No bloodshed, stopped the program for probably, at least 2 years as they rebuilt that entire thing. So is that a factor? Yes, but he's always been saying that. What's the difference now? Why now, and why they decided like they're going to act on it? Whether it's smart or stupid is the second part of the debate. But tactically, you can see why certainly other people wanted him to do it. The Lindsey Grahams of the world wanted him to do it because they knew the minute you start this, you don't have this pile of options sitting in front of you. That's the thing. There aren't 8 possibilities. There aren't, well, we could go in and stay for a little bit and then get out, or we could stay a couple more weeks and we'll hit this, then we'll get out, or maybe we'll put, special forces in, have them pop out. None of that is true at this point. Like,
the options are narrowing.
Yeah, I would argue that they narrowed from the first, but the options that they're presenting are PR. At this point, they are really about the public and kind of tapping us along and going, well, this became a necessity and you had to do this and we don't want to do this, but they did this in response, which was totally predictable. So as you were saying in the beginning, like I would, in our last like 10 minutes together, I would like to, from a tactical and strategic point of view, devil's advocate, what the Iranian options are. Because you've obviously thought this through as well. I try to do this as well. Like, if they have options, where's their thinking, if any exists right now? If there's a leadership, what are their plans besides making Lego videos and posting them on X? What strategically, what violence might they carry out? What options do they have for real? Because I really also think that they don't have any talks with Trump will be seen as surrender because this was an unprovoked attack. specifically. It was a preemptive defense strike, which is, oxymoron. But from their point of view, it will look like, capitulation. So even the hardliners that do support them, the 20% of the populace that does support these guys, will turn on them as well, and then you're done. Then it becomes, I like faction fighting, I guess, inside the country. So what if you were in that circumstance from an Iranian point of view, what are your options?
So, first of all, my number one goal would be to survive. So, there's no way for us to fight the Americans. If I had any illusions about that, they were gone after 2 days. So, the grasp Israeli and US intelligence has and their ability to kill any leader
Right.
and the devastating power of the US military and Air Force makes it very clear that my only goal is to survive. And once I survive, with the help of the Russians and the Chinese, rebuild my party and control the IRGC, because the IRGC needs to keep the, let's call it the mob from the perspective of the leaders at home. So what I need to do is I say to myself, there's a limit to how much a democracy is going to be willing to fight. Now, I probably have been telling everybody around me, just stick together for 2 weeks and Trump will say that he has won and it's over. Now the calculus starts to change and maybe they need to change some of their narrative, but still they need to believe that there's a limit to how much the Americans, us, are going to be willing to pay and sacrifice on Iranian soil. That needs to be their assumption number one.
Right.
Now, what they need to do is keep the citizens at home. That means that their besieged militia needs to kill anybody who appears in the street in order to make sure that there's no uprising. And then what they'll do is they'll survive, and there's actually no price which they will not tolerate. There's no price. So long as they can come out of this and say, okay, now let's rebuild and control the public, then from their perspective, they have won. This is not our calculation, but that's their calculation. So that's one and two. Number three, they need to make it very painful for everybody around. That's why the Straits of Hormuz are stopped. This narrows the latitude that the US and the president has leading to the elections, because we know that the president cares about the stock market.
Mhm.
So what they need to do is survive. There is no orchestrated strategy. They don't need to say continue to fire missiles. There doesn't need to be strategic orchestration. If you're say a lieutenant colonel, or you're a major, or you're a captain, and you're responsible for a few missiles, keep shooting the missiles to this target range in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain, in Israel. Of course, try to get the Houthis involved, try to get Hezbollah involved, and let's just fatigue the United States. That's their only strategy. And if they survive and they're able to keep the citizens at home, then they're going to be successful. In 5 years, we're going to be at the same place. So to me, that's their calculus.
Mm-hmm. Right. I agree. I mean, I think that the other aspect is that they do have to maintain a certain amount, whether it's, buried and hidden or whatever, of their missile capability, so that the IDF doesn't just do cleanup even if the United States leaves. Because the other aspect I think that they have to deal with, and I think we started off with this with a very real idea that there's certainly Mossad inside Iran. They would be, again, tactically, strategically stupid not to. I think they've been probably lasering targets for years, and they certainly did it last time when we were, when the U.S. bombed the nuclear sites. I'm sure they were also doing their own attacks while we were doing that. The IDF had hit a bunch of places. Once the air defenses were down, at this point, I don't know what categorically. They just arrested a bunch of Starlink dealers in the country because I think the internet is down to 3%, and that's largely that's exactly the military comms in the country. That's probably only those channels, only those people are able to have it to some degree. Again, that's also something that will die in the next few years because you won't need a Starlink terminal to do it. You'll have that and Kuiper and a couple of other things, and most phones, if they're new enough, will be able to use some level of, like, even the iPhone 16 or whatever even has a satellite setting on it if you're completely out of range. So that's becoming increasingly normal. and will also be a factor in the future. So you won't be able to stop an uprising like this on their end. You know that I think the Iranians are probably in a similar situation to what you're talking about with the Israelis feel, in that they're like, if we don't put down the people and keep them, you know, herded into certain, you know, especially into information cul-de-sacs and technological cul-de-sacs where they can't reach the outside world if we so choose, in a situation where we can shut down the internet or shut down communications. If we can't do that, then we're going to be facing this again in 5 years. Like, is the idea they're going to deal with this uprising as that disgruntled aspect of the public grows as well. So there's a perfect storm of all these elements. I do think they've been bunkerizing themselves and building this like long range missile system for a while. The NATO just intercepted another missile headed towards Turkey, which I find particularly peculiar. And if I put my tinfoil hat on, I would say that it would be. I'm not saying this is being done. I want to be clear about this, but there is a reason why, if you were Mossad, if you could get in there and fire, take control of some of their missile systems and fire them at some people that they might view as allies, those allies might, and they're not communicating, or they can just say, we didn't tell them to hit you. Well, we must have been on your strike list in case of decapitation this whole time, so you're not really our friend, and that kind of stuff. And so, so that level of discord, we're talking about a mob level, cartel level of, paranoia and internal miscommunication or whatever being used against them. This is stuff they use to break up the mob. That this, you undercover agents feeding intel to people that makes them think somebody's bad. Anybody who's seen Miller's Crossing knows what I'm talking about. So that's not unheard of. I'm not saying that's what's being done, but tactically and strategically, I can see that happening. And maybe Turkey's written that in. Maybe they understand. Maybe they recognize that. That's why they've been relatively neutral, even though they side with Iran. So so they have, not only does the regime have to stay, but they do have to maintain some level of their military, because they're going to need more than just a police force with pistols to deal with the uprising when it happens.
But in my mind, that's just enough to control the public. I don't think that they need missiles. They win from their perspective if they survive and they control the public, and then they can rebuild. So what they need to do, in my humble opinion, is just keep the IRGC and the siege militia, with some hope that the Americans are going to go home, that we're going to fatigue at some point in time. Because the minute that the IRGC and the siege militia believe that it's over, then there's going to be an uprising, and then they lose. So I think that it would be nice if they can maintain more weapons, but I would say just enough to keep the citizens at home so they can rebuild. The worst thing that could happen is an uprising where they lose their position, and then there's some Shah or some new general that manages
right. But then
Iran. And I agree with you that the narrative for the Muslim world, so at the end of the day, all the Arab nations there need to explain to their people why they're okay with the U.S. taking over or winning against another Muslim country. Forget about the Shia-Sunni aspect. So from that perspective, and of course, I don't know who's firing the missiles at Turkey. I think it's a strategic mistake for Iran, but it could be that everything is broken into levels of captains and majors, and they're doing whatever they were told a month ago. But I think it's a mistake, but it helps the narrative that Turkey, that Saudi Arabia, all the Arab countries can later explain why they were okay with allowing the Americans to basically create this devastation in Iran.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could, I didn't see those missiles in the air myself. We're going on reports of, whatever's going on there. So it could be a complete myth made up just to, allow some sort of plausible deniability on the part of some leadership of other countries that just want this problem to go away. I can see that because of the importance and the high level of this. I mean, it's not the kind of fakery you would need to pretend you went to the moon or something like that. It's, we're not talking about, that major a false flag or an illusion. But
that it happened. I just don't know who was pulling the strings.
Right.
It definitely doesn't make sense for the Iranians to mess with the Turks right now.
Yeah, it's very peculiar. And again, it may just be grudges or paranoia, or troops are amassing, or they're a NATO country and they've already we've never trusted them, and then they just decide, it, we got to let them know who's boss. Let them know we still can hit them, and so even if we don't intend to, or even quite frankly, check and see. Use that the missile itself might be able to reach Turkey insofar as the what people are expecting, but the idea is that check NATO's range and their ability to shoot stuff down, so that if you need to hit, and like again, Spanish targets don't make any more sense either, because the Spain have been the most, like of the European countries, they've been the most, I guess, sympathetic to what Iran is going through, and have certainly spoken out the most. But they would also be one of the easier countries to hit, along with Italy and the like. So, from like I said, from a tactical point of view, and I think this was part of the calculation of of the neocons in our own country and the generals themselves, who have had this on their to-do list since the mid 90s, is that they knew that if they could talk Donald Trump into, or he stupidly decided on his own he wanted to do it, or what have you, into bombing Iran last year, that it would set in motion a circumstance where literally their responsibility to national security would require them to do a full-scale attack. They knew it, right? In the same way that, I'm sure members of the IDF and members of the Knesset, and whether they liked Netanyahu or not, knew that once this started, there's no stopping it, and therefore, get ready. And I think there's a paranoia about that amongst the maggotry over here, the Trump's followers, that part of it is the Iraq war, and we've seen this before in Yellow Cake, and we got baited into this situation. But also, I think their awareness of the tactical reality that you can't do this by half measures, and that's what scares them. And there's a fear now among some of them that's maybe equal to Trump, putting ground troops on there, that he'll do half measures, declarative victory, and leave us more vulnerable than we have ever been to an Iranian attack, because there will be a justification matrix amongst the Muslims in Iran and the Iran sympathetic countries, that America it may have had it coming before as the great Satan in generic terms, but now they really have it coming because they attacked us specifically. And so I think there are a lot of those folks that might not have been on board with this, but are like, now what? We have to finish these guys off, otherwise they're going to come for us. And that's where it looks more like a police action than a war. So I
do believe that there are people on the right side of the map that do hold the view of, if we're not going to mess with them, they're not going to mess with us. So let's just mind our own business. I think that there is this mindset. It's not my mindset, because I think we do need to project power. And if we were not in the Middle East in the last 25 years, we would have had another 9/11. But I do think that people hold this view of, let's not interfere with what's not our business, right? We're in the Middle East, and they're not going to hit us back.
Right. Doran Kemble, and I don't want to mispronounce Sarayet Matkal, but you were a highly decorated commander of the IDF's elite special operations unit, and so you have seen, I suppose, you're a firefighter too in your life, and have experienced at least a tacit closeness to this kind of stuff, as opposed to just a strategic, distance. And not all of your learnedness has come from the warm side of a bay window, as it were. So I appreciate you being on, and I want to be clear again to our chat room and everybody that what you and I are talking about are not 4 months ago a philosophical discussion, or 6 months ago or 8 months ago last summer, about whether or not this is advisable to bomb Iran or go into Iran. But just once this is done by the leadership that you and I, neither of us have control over right now, neither of us can run in and throw a switch and change the direction of this, but the decision making that is going on in both of our countries right now. We're both Americans, but you were originally an Israeli citizen, now an American citizen. That these are the tactical decisions they are making now, and part of the reason why a lot of people didn't want to open up this can of worms or rip off this Band-Aid was because knowing that once it starts, it won't stop. Very much like Iraq and Afghanistan, that you're not going to be able to do shock and awe and go home. That's not how this works. It's never how this works. And whether Trump was tricked into believing how it works, that that's what it is, or whether he knows full well that they're going to go through with this all the way, is immaterial to the circumstance we find ourselves in. And when they start telling us stories in the press about we might do this, we might do that, I think it's very important for people to understand what you and I have been talking about, which is options narrow very quickly. Everybody's got a plan to get punched in the face. And the reality is just because something's stupid doesn't mean it's not the plan. And that a lot of these options have already been cleared. And we find ourselves looking at this through a prism or through a window, as viewers, as citizens, going, how's this going to go? And if people know tactically, strategically where the reality is right now, I think they'll have a better picture of what, when they hear it from the White House or they hear it from Netanyahu or others, whether they're being told the truth or not about where this is going to go. Agreed? Or
Absolutely. So what we're trying to do is paint a picture as we see it, explain where the pieces are on the board, so people are less naive, understanding what they're told is going on.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on. I greatly appreciate it. We'll speak to you again, I'm sure, hopefully in more peaceful times and sooner rather than later.
Thank you for having me over.
Absolutely. Cheers. Thank you so much. And I'll let you go. There he goes. Ladies and gentlemen, Doran Kempel joining us in the conversation, and appreciate you guys in the chat room. I want to be really clear about this. When we have guests on that are talking about this aspect of it, you guys know that I do this this exercise, this if I was evil exercise when I'm looking at a situation, because it really helps when you have an opponent or you have whether it's political or whether it's a violent one. If you had a home invasion, if it would help sometimes if you looked at your own house and you went, if I was going to break into this place, how would I do it? If I was going to, go in here and take over the family and kind of BTK this family, where would I start? What's the weak point? And you can save yourself a lot of future grief if you're aware of that. Yes, Mooney Girl says, I call it if I were a piece of shit. Absolutely. It's the same thing. But it has value. There's a reason why in a martial arts class, for example, you take turns striking each other, first, so that the other person can react to what it's like to strike somebody, but also to be that person as well. So you can go, all right, this is how I would react. And if I see these targets, they see these targets too. Okay. Because you will not have control over your opponent or the villain in a circumstances attack plan. You won't. The best you will have is an awareness of how it could go. Right. And from that, you can literally make a safer decision for yourself. You can also recognize when you are being bullshitted by the Trump administration, or like I said, Bibi Netanyahu, about these kind of things. Because when they tell you, oh, we can get out in 2 weeks, we can get out and, we'll declare victory and piss off home and stuff. Once we started this, you guys know, I've been talking about this for a little bit, that those options go off the table. This is too serious. This is not, the strike last year where they told us we're going to hit our base and then that was it, so we could pretend. Once you cross this threshold, you're now responsible for everything that happens afterwards. And so even the people in the military, even the people in the government, I would argue, even members of the Senate and the House who are against this in the first place, who still think it's a terrible mistake, are it's either setting in or they're becoming aware, or they already are, that one of the reasons they're against it so vehemently is because if you start this, you can't stop until it's done. I mean, you're picking a fight in a situation with someone who is, it's funny, like as a diminutive fighter myself, as 5'9" and a $1.65 fully clothed, soaking wet. I make a lot of determinations, and I think a lot of people who've studied martial arts will tell you the same about every fight has a chance to go sideways, so better not to do it. But sometimes the decision you're making is there is no way I start a fight with this guy without having to kill him, and it's not worth it. Walking because there are no options. There's no point where toe to toe physically this is a punch out. It's not going to happen. And so that's it. That's and that's the calculation you have to make. I can kill someone. Am I willing to do it? No. And it's very important to recognize that that is a real strategic, legitimate thought. Okay. Wayne says, I cannot ever justify war. Well, I think what you mean is preemptive war, because I don't think Ukraine needs any justification to fight back against Russia, right? Again, war, we use war like both participants fucking started it. And that is hardly ever the case. That war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again. Starting one, yeah. But defending yourself in a war, you're still a member of that war. War is the generic term we use for both sides fighting, which is not a moral definition. Morally, both players in a war are not equally culpable. Trump started this in Iran. Yeah. So these are important distinctions. I don't think anybody's bothering to make. Can I look, we've got a bunch to, there was, I'll show you this. Hold on. Trump basically, while we're at war, he's showing pictures of the ballroom, and then he basically said there's a new bunker underneath it because he's fucking stupid. And, which, by the way, of course there is, but, hold on. Trump, in the bunker, like the bunker ballroom, the Epstein ballroom that he's building. Yeah. So he does this. I'll show you this. This is just so fucking embarrassing. But not surprising at all. Hold on. There we go. This business right here. Oh, by the way, yes, pardon the non-nut warning, and also he did. You're right. He does look like hammered shit. See if this plays.
This is
Even the internet doesn't want to look at this asshole.
As they are going to be made, they're going to be hand carved, and they're beautiful. Top of the line. They'll be Corinthian, which is considered the best, most
Yes, more than 2 Corinthians now.
beautiful by far. Okay.
What's your timeline on this thing?
Timeline. So we're ahead of schedule and under budget.
Which is just muscle memory bullshit from his days of lying to investors about properties.
And all of this money, all of the money paid are paid by myself and donors, and it's all donors. There's not one dime of.
Yeah, I guess they all get to go there like Paradise, like the TV show Paradise. It's an entry fee. It's like a private. It's like Club 33 at Disney World.
Government money going into the ballroom. Now the military is building a big complex under the ballroom.
Thanks, dummy.
Which has
alien bodies. It's going to have alien corpses. They're going to dissect the aliens.
Come out recently because of a stupid lawsuit that was filed. But the military is building a massive complex under the ballroom, and that's under construction, and we're doing very well. So we're ahead of schedule. That's part of it. The ballroom essentially becomes a shed for what's being built under the military, including.
Right. So it's cover. Sorry. What was the fact-based ones have noiseless. Oh wait. By the way, I think. Hold on. Let's see if this works now. Where is it? Why is it not? Oh, I understand. Okay, because this isn't on YouTube. This is whatever. YouTube now has a voice mode. Yeah, that's the bunker where they're gonna chop up the alien bodies and dissect them. Um, the by the way, I hope everybody had fun at the No Kings rally. I certainly did. Our dear friend Tara Dublin, who does Indeed Rock, wrote an article. Triggered MAGA had a full-on meltdown while claiming not to care about No Kings. So congrats, Tara Dublin, for writing for Raw Story now, which is awesome. So when you subscribe, you can help our dear friend Tara Dublin. I don't know if there's a promo code or something that lets Raw Story know that people subscribe because she joined. I think that'd be cool, but I don't know. Don't know. But regardless, I don't hate. I'm a hippie woman, but I loathe Stinky and his buzz. It's a shed. Yeah, what he means is it's cover, like it's a facade. That the ballroom aspect of it will be basically they're going to build the outside of it, and the interior of the ballroom will take the longest because it's actually just hiding what they're building in there. If that makes sense. Who's watching or has watched the show Paradise? Tara Dublin, the chick that called Charlie Kirk a Jew hater. I don't know. I don't remember if she called him that. I'm sure she called him other things though that were completely reasonable in that regard. There's been a big let's see if I can find it. Yeah, this business right here, which was famously making the rounds. No nukes for Iran, no troops on the ground, no U.S. troops dead, no regime change, no nation building, no war. President Trump with a historic masterclass. This was last year. Not so much. Let's see. There is yeah, here you go. So this is Charlie Kirk. This one's I think been making the rounds, and you'll see generally why. Generically, but
let's do
also
some
yeah, why a lot of folks think that Trump and Patel had him killed and all this other stuff. Like now I know why they wanted him dead. That's somebody
updates about Israel and Iran and potentially the United States. On one side is the Lindsey Graham, John Bolton types, where they are actively calling.
Also, by the way, the Donald Trump types. This was Trump's decision.
For regime change. Here is Lindsey Graham. This is just lunacy. This kind of analysis is not helpful. This kind of approach, this kind of argument, it has nothing to do with nuclear weapons at this point. This is now that we want to go all in and take out the regime. It's time for us to close the chapter on the Iranian Ayatollah and his henchmen and start a new chapter in the Middle East.
Yeah, asshole. Sorry to talk ill of the dead, but we all saw this coming. How in the ever... And by the way, who gives a goddamn what Lindsey Graham said or says at any point? Donald Trump is the one doing it. They have been running interference for Trump's own decisions this entire time. I don't care that AIPAC has a lobby. I don't care that Lindsey Graham says all this stuff. It's ultimately still up to Donald Trump. He is not hypnotized. So why not lay the blame right where it belongs, at the feet of the decider? At the person who says he knows better than all the generals and all this. Why and who gives a damn if Bibi Netanyahu called Trump 7 or 15 times? Trump said yes. The same number of calls could have happened, and Trump could have said no. The amount of just like the shuffle that goes on of ethics, reason, and excuses to give Trump a pass because somebody, look who was saying this. Who gives a shit? He made the decision. And the fact that that Charlie Kirk put Lindsey Graham in the John Bolton category, when last year Trump was talking about what an idiot and a weakling and whoever crazy person John Bolton was, and then ends up doing exactly what John Bolton wanted. Why the shit is it John Bolton's, fault that Donald Trump hates him and yet did what he hates him for anyways?
That sounds good, doesn't it? But what have we learned when it comes to wars, and especially wars in the Middle East? What you draw up on a whiteboard rarely happens. What you think theoretically is going to occur, there might be unintended and unforeseen consequences.
That's literally what happens in every war. Battle plans are always adjusted, but I get where he's going.
Especially
Sorry.
when you're talking about a country 2.5 times the size of Texas.
Well, you're overestimating Texas's resolve, I think, too. Also, are you counting the native land in Texas, which makes it porous and look like Swiss cheese?
It has 90 million people and was an ancient and great power with well over a dozen ethnic groups. You have underground Christians. You don't really have many Jews left in Persia. But also you have secular younger Persians. Who's going to run the country exactly, Lindsey Graham? This sounds like Hillary Rodham Clinton in Libya. So I'm pointing
Does it, though?
to the first extreme right now.
Is Libya the same size? Yeah.
Neoconservative extreme. The we must go take off the head of the snake right now. Play cut 285.
Be all in, President Trump, in helping Israel eliminate the nuclear threat. If we need to provide bombs to Israel, provide bombs. If we need to fly planes with Israel, do joint operations. But here's the bigger question. Wouldn't the world be better off if the Ayatollahs went away and replaced by something better? Wouldn't Iran be better off?
Yeah, brilliant. Anyways, you get the point. Is that that clip of Charlie Kirk, that montage, has been making the rounds about, over the last, 3 weeks especially, and it's just gaining steam. And it has you can almost track what's going to happen in the midterms by, is Lindsey Graham getting more popular or less popular right now? Think about it. If Lindsey Graham was suddenly like, oh, they decided they liked him again. How do you that would point to like the MAGA tree, and the Republicans are coming around. They're going to finally get in line. They're going to fall in love and then fall in line. They're going to vote in big numbers because they've put away they've sheathed their swords and they're getting along. They're marching together, right, hand in hand, hand in pocket. If it's Lindsey Graham, I suppose, or Matt Schlapp, and they're all gonna get it together, right? But it hasn't. He's become even more vilified. He went to fucking Disneyland, or Disney World. He went to Disney World and was just like walking around. Lindsey Graham went to Disney World by himself. I'm not kidding. I don't know if you guys saw this. Lindsey Graham ridiculed after seen carrying a bubble wand at a theme park amid the shutdown. After new photos appear to show the lawmaker carrying a bubble wand while visiting Walt Disney World in Orlando amid the ongoing government shutdown, Graham received pushback on Sunday after photos emerged of him dining at Disney World's Chef Mickey's, with criticism centered around the optics of a member of Congress sitting at a theme park as tens of thousands of TSA employees continue to work unpaid. TMZ received a fresh batch of photos of Graham, only this time photos that appeared to show the lawmaker was acting as a full-blown tourist. I don't know if here he is. There is just walking around by himself. Not creepy at all. Lindsey Graham lives it up at Disney World during the partial government shutdown. P.S. Fuck TMZ. But if he was getting more liked by the Republicans, if maggots were like, finally, Lindsey Graham's saying something right. Broken clock moment for Lindsey Graham. fuck is a bubble wand? It's a little toy that you can get at Disneyland that literally shoots bubbles out of it. It's got like basically soap in it and water, and you push a button on it and it makes bubbles. If you've ever been at Disneyland or Disney World, you've walked through the wall of bubbles when a little kid sitting in a stroller has got one of those things and he's just got a death grip on the button and it's just going Bubbles is his grinder name. Ew. I chose it because it reminded me of Michael Jackson's Monkey. So I want to show you guys something. Like, I normally don't do videos on the morning show, but I want to show you something this morning that I'm gonna torture you with having to see it, because if I had to see it, have to see it, so do you. No. That let's open this up in a new tab. There we go. Let's see if it please open the yeah, there we go. There's a bunch of this shit. Sign of the times, method your mind. Hurry before it's too late. Because when the night falls and a bomb falls. Anybody? All right. The sign of the end times. Are we too distracted to notice what's happening before our eyes? Now, this is like, I guess, late yesterday or yesterday's show, I suppose. I'm going to show you the top of this, but I'm going to jump ahead at one point. Needless to say, he's like, the world's ending. This is the whole thing. And by the way, I don't want to disappoint anybody, but it is absolutely not ending. The world is not ending. These bozos could fuck up the world and turn parts of it into glow in the dark embers, and still humans would climb out of the fucking rubble and start to build something again. It's so stupid, and it's so short-sighted, and it's so weak, and I almost categorically put this under you fucking wish. Boy, it'd be so easy if Lord just came down and snatched you right up. You wouldn't have to explain to everybody what a dickhead you were.
I want you to take a look at the world that we are standing in right now.
Okay. No, I mean, I can't see the whole world, but I can see, maybe I got the curtains are closed, but Okay. Took a look. Now what?
A war with Iran that has already drawn in the United States and Israel. And
sorry, it did what? Sorry, a war with Iran that drew in the United States? I guess that's one way to look at it. Do you mean we fucking started it?
Starting to separate people.
Is it? Oh, no. Do you think he's worried about Democrats and Republicans not getting along? You think he's worried about a split on the left from the establishment and the fringe on the left? And oh dear, what would happen if they're not a cohesive unit?
Oil routes are threatened. Missiles crossing borders. Regional
Yes, which has been happening for fucking ever.
Powers trembling. The Vatican pleading for bombs to stop.
Yeah, they do that occasionally. It's weird.
There is a description of these times at the end of the Bible. It's
at the end of the Bible, which, by the way, Revelations was never meant to be it wasn't supposed to be the end of the book. It was an editorial choice at the Congress of Nicaea that they, but this is important. I think there's a reason why we make this. Hold on.
Seven seals.
Here it comes.
wars and rumors of wars.
That's right.
Cuts and heels.
At the end of the Bible, it's wars and rumors of wars. At the end of the Bible, it's wars and rumors of wars. And that's the way everything kind of feels right now.
No, it doesn't. It always felt like wars and rumors of wars, shithead. That's why it's been so successful as sort of a catch-all Armageddon any day now phrase, is because when the fuck has that not been true? Wars and rumors of wars? Jesus Christ. Why don't you just say chicken pox and rumors of chicken pox? Fuck off. Yeah, I wrote that song. I just wrote it with AI. I was like writing. I was pulling the signs of the seven seals and what they would be broken apart, and then I was like, I want to write a song called "Wars and Rumors of Wars." So anyways, so it took me a couple of iterations melodically to get where in general I liked it, but it's still a little silly, which is how I like my AI stuff because of anyways. So it, this fallback.
Rumors of wars.
Hold on.
At the end of the Bible, it's wars and rumors of wars. And that's the way everything kind of feels right now.
Does it?
You might have heard your father, your grandfather say, there are no atheists in a foxhole.
But there are actually.
The prospect of war, even one across the world,
I'm pretty sure every Soviet soldier sorry,
makes people reach for ancient stories and holy books.
Thank you, Colleen.
Whether you're religious or not, it happens.
Sometimes it doesn't.
And there is something unsettling that is going on.
Glenn, your show wouldn't exist if it wasn't. I got shit to do. You got nothing else, buddy.
And something about this war in particular that makes us think about the ancient world and the beginning of everything, but also the end of everything.
Yeah, that's how I think of things. Like I think of life as like a big fucking switch. When you're born, they turn it on, and when you die, you turn it off, and everything in between is just part of the flick. You know what I mean? It's what I think about. Yeah, that's how I think of life. The stuff in the middle. All the food and sex and parties and ice skating and trips to the ballpark and books and stuff like that, all that. On off. That's it.
Whether that's nuclear war or the apocalypse, things that none of us want to think about. We don't want to.
Why not? I think they're great mental exercises.
Think about those things.
Well, who cares what you want? I'm going to think what I want to think. Don't try to pre-crime me.
Christians believe that upheaval, apostasy, calamity, a moral collapse are signs of the end.
Right, and they've been wrong forever because we've had all of those things since Jesus peaced out.
But we don't know when that end is. This has happened over and over again all throughout history.
Maybe God's tolerance for moral degradation is much higher than you think. Do you ever think about that? I mean, if he made everything, everything, including Satan, then maybe it's a little hard to peg his needle, if you know what I'm saying. That sounded dirty.
Some Jews look at Israel restored in their land, surrounded by enemies, and asking whether, is history moving to the place where the Messiah, as promised to the Jews, is coming?
Yeah, different guy, but same clothes.
Muslims, especially with the Shia eschatology, they hear this language of oppression and chaos and deception and war and ask whether is Trump the Dajjal? Is he the Antichrist?
No. The Antichrist is learned and charming. That's part of it. That's what makes him so effective. Yeah, Trump is Timu Antichrist.
They're actually saying that in parts of the Middle East. He might be the Antichrist.
Yeah, and then they laugh and high five each other.
Is the Mahdi coming? And
I hope Mahdi shows up in time. That's all right.
Own tradition speaks of white.
This is so stupid. Let me explain something to you. People's deeply held spiritual beliefs or lack thereof is their own business and deserves a certain level of respect. But I am not going to respect this asshole's take on any of this nonsense. Do you understand? Do you get it? Do you get it that some issues are so serious and deserve such depth of thought that I become hostile to dipshits like this, batting them around like a cat with a ball of string, like I don't understand. I don't understand. I'm not gonna pretend to respect the purveyor of the idea as much as the idea itself. I refuse.
Spread injustice and the Mahdi being revealed. Jesus comes back, but not as Jesus.
I like it when Mahdi is revealed. Look out. It's all good.
This is, anyway, the deceiver falling, the great Satan falling. and history rushing towards a reckoning.
That's what we're working on. Make Satan great again. That's all we're working towards.
So let me talk to you about what's happening here. What do you
What's happening, Raj?
see happening?
I don't know.
The world's great faiths are not suddenly agreeing on every
He's monologuing on the shit. I want to show you where he gets, though.
vocabulary. Has a claim on them.
Okay.
To somebody else, the school, the state,
The blah, blah, blah.
and all.
Blah, blah, blah.
Shake beneath our feet. And yet we don't stop and say, what are we really arguing for here? What, I mean,
Yeah. Whoa. Good God. What is it good for? Oil prices and gold, yeah.
the end of days, would we even notice?
Nah, probably not. Everybody's on their phone. Can you imagine being the pale horse rider and going, the fuck? Hey, I'm terrifying. Get off your phones. Look, pestilence. Get them.
Busy branding ourselves, too busy chasing comfort, too busy treating the soul like an afterthought.
Oh, yeah, like all the things people do when they're not scrounging for scraps.
I've been thinking about this a lot over the last few weeks, and
Oh, no.
it is important that you hear me. If there's even a possibility that this is such a time, then our conversations are absurd. We should
Yours
be
are.
talking less about who won the, clip of the day war, and more about whether we are right with our maker. Less about endless outrage machine and more about repentance and forgiveness and
That's right.
courage and
It's
discipline and
do it.
empathy and mercy.
Yeah, not the fact that I wasn't invited to.
When's the
TPSA.
last time your social media said to you, what kind of man are you becoming?
Well, I got a DM like that.
When's the last time
but
you
it-
pondered that?
think
What
it was
kind
a
of a
pi-
woman
I think
am
it was a Rose
becoming?
Park ad.
What have I taught through my actions, through
don't
the
know.
way I live my life?
I don't know.
What have I taught my children to worship? Comfort? Success?
I don't know how you worship
Identity?
comfort.
Tribe? Or truth? Do they know what truth is?
Probably not, because they're kids,
Have I
Brain
made
is-
peace with my neighbor? Have I made peace with my family?
They park in front of our
Have I
house. so
told
when
my family
gotta
what
put garbage
matters
out, and
most, and am I
They know that's
living
where
my
our
life
garbage
that
cans
way?
go. Wait, I'm still on my neighbor. There's
Have I
stuff
lived
sitting-
my life as though history is
Have
random?
I lived my life as if
Or have I
history's
lived my
random
life, and am I
Have I
living my
lived my
life
life
today,
today?
knowing that one day I will
Knowing
have
that
to
one
answer
day
for the life and
I'm
for
gonna
every
have
minute
to
I was
answer
given?
for my bullshit. Oh no. People, what are we gonna do? Here it comes the tears.
For over 30 years,
Oh no.
I've made a living looking
Being full
ahead,
of shit. Sorry. Yes, you're right. Looking ahead. That's what I was
connecting dots,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes seeing patterns before they fully form.
Or even if they exist
And if you've
at all.
listened to me for any length of time,
It always
know
feels
this
like a long
already.
time.
but
Yeah, I know this.
there's a lot of times I am not right. I'll say it. There are a lot
Most
of times
of-
I am out and out wrong.
Most of the time, I would say.
Things I misunderstood. Times I moved
Like
too
English.
fast. Times I trusted the wrong sources.
Like the
Filled
White
in
House.
the gaps with my own conclusions. That's real, and that's all on me.
Right. Well, you've been
But there
gapping
is
it for a long
another
time.
part of my record that matters.
Mhm.
Because when you step back and you look at the arc, there are moments, if you've been listening to me
Or
for a long
Mormons.
time,
We don't know. Could
that
be
are
Mormons.
hard to ignore. In 1999, I spoke about Osama bin Laden,
Oh,
and
like
I
everybody else
said
was?
there will be a major terrorist attack on New York City with blood, bodies, and buildings in the streets. 2 years later, it happened.
It also happened 3
In the
years
early
before.
2000s,
So,
I warned about our financial system, stressed beyond reason. Something
you were
that
saying
could
that 'cause of
snap and
government
take
debt.
the world down with it.
yeah, that's not
In
what you meant.
2008, it did.
Yeah, but that was a different thing entirely. It wasn't the. I'm just saying.
I thought it would lead us to a Great Depression. I was wrong because I didn't see TARP. But when I saw TARP, I said these interventions, the bailouts, they're going to stabilize things in the short term. They'll fundamentally change our system, and they will
no.
delay a deeper reckoning, and that deeper reckoning is still ahead. It's not a
Well,
victory lap. This is a timeline.
If it
I've
doesn't
talked
happen,
about
is
the
it still
ideological movements, the Marxist, anarchist, Islamists forming strange alliances that nobody said Nobody
you
could
know,
say they would ever do.
Not here to yuck anybody's
I was
yum.
crazy for saying it.
They get together and kind
I
of
warned that they would create chaos in the Middle East and then chaos in Europe, and it would lead to massive migration waves that would test the cohesion of all
Oh, you mean the
Western
Russians did
nations.
that.
It
Yes,
would
that's
come
right, when the
here
Russians
to
did it.
America and cause chaos in America. And
Chaos.
its plan was
Everywhere.
to topple the Western world and Western civilization.
yeah,
That was something that
That's
was
your job.
nuts when I first said it.
crazy. It still is. Yep.
It's not really now, is it?
Oh, no. Yes, I suppose. it
Years
is.
ago, I spoke about artificial intelligence in terms that sounded extreme at the time, that we could reach something like AGI around 2030.
Yeah, no, he didn't. He did not put the timeline out. He's not. He read Kurzweil's book. Hold on, let me get to this point. I'll jump ahead.
Not dis.
Yeah, here it is. So this is where it gets really. This is what happens when your entire media empire is based on like a political volleyball that you're responsible for just keeping in the air, no matter how bad your team is, and yet you really want to be Reverend Gene Scott. That's it.
But when it's something else, something that
Something else.
arrives
Mm.
fully formed,
I often do.
and also as a weight and a clarity
Clarity.
and an urgency, I have learned, do not dismiss or ignore it.
No. Take the signs
And that's
from
what
the
I want
Lord.
to talk to you about today.
Yeah, I'm not interested. Anyways, so apparently he's gotten signs and wonders, and he wants to tell you guys that the end of the world is both here and not here. Make peace with God, but not all of it. Make a small peace with God. I guess carve off a small piece with God. And I guess that's where we will find ourselves. My favorite part is where he just chokes up on the word clarity. Like, don't ignore the signs that God is giving you. This is the thing that when a giant angel standing at the end of your bed with his dick hanging out, like, listen.
Clarity. And also as a weight and a clarity.
Clarity. Dude, you do not carry the burden of prophecy, you asshole. Fucking hell. I was surprised. Like, I watched some of these dickheads do their little piece, and just to keep informed on what the messaging is, try not to have to overdo it. And let's see, what is this? Yeah, here we go. That I don't want you guys to have to see all of it, but there's a big portion of this where I need to be up on what they're selling, so that we know it. I know how to explain it. I know how to, yeah. So this is, let's see if we, all right, yeah, here's mornings with the
In the middle of the night, the Senate sent us over a bill that was absolutely unacceptable. So
It's terrible.
basically what they're saying is Customs and Border Patrol has no authority, no money for Customs Border Patrol.
They already got like triple their budget last year.
And our national security, no funding for DHS. And we will not negotiate while they're holding not only our national security hostage, but while they're holding the Department of DHS, TSA.
The TLC, they're holding, THC, maybe they're holding your gummies hostage. Perhaps you need a couple.
Agents hostage and not getting them paid.
I think Leader Thune laid it out that we had assurance from OMB that both CBP and ICE are fully funded and they have the flexibility to fund them through the end of this fiscal year. So that was the reality we were going into with these negotiations. So this is the only thing we can get Democrats to agree to: fund the rest of ICE, fund the rest of DHS, TSA, Coast Guard, CISA, all these other things. Get that funded. Use the funding from the reconciliation bill early in the year and then move to a reconciliation process where we can fund DHS through fiscal year 2029. That'd be my preference.
And that was House Republican Conference Chairwoman Lisa McClain, followed by Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson with me yesterday after the House rejected the Senate's deal.
So, point being is that the funding for ICE came in the big bullshit bill last year. So this is all performative on the part of the Republicans. It's the rest of DHS funding that hangs in the balance and an extra, pile of money, a slush fund effectively that Trump can use to add more money to what ICE has coming to it. That's what they were hoping for because they burned through it like crazy. Our national debt is, approaching 40 trillion because Donald Trump and the whole like when's the last time we heard from Chip Roy other than him blowing a stitch?
To end the DHS shutdown late Friday night because CBP and ICE were not funded. Let's talk more about this right now with Senator Roger Marshall joining me right now with more on this. And Senator, it's great to have you this morning. We so appreciate you joining us.
And thank you for wearing your not allowed within 500 yards of a school playground by order of the court outfit.
Agree with your colleague, what you just heard from Ron Johnson?
Yeah, I think in principle, yes. Unfortunately, the Democrats are never going to fund ICE or Border Patrol. So we have to do something. And I'm as frustrated.
No, Border Patrol isn't the problem at all. It's about ICE. And it's largely, they're going to fund ICE. They just they actually want to pay for more of ICE. They want them to have body cams. That would be the key. Let's take a look at, hold on, let me look at the NASDAQ and what have you. Oh, by the way, the stock market thing, one of the reasons why Trump and those guys feel okay about it is because the SpaceX IPO is going to happen, and people are expecting it to be the biggest IPO in history, followed by Anthropic and OpenAI later this fall to guarantee that the stock market will go up even if everything else goes down. And Trump this morning... Let's see if I can open this up. Hold on. Yeah, okay, we put this in the thing. So Trump has warns of escalation as troops arrive in the region. This is the reality that we're in right now. I would argue this is the reality we have been in since last year. The point I've been trying to make, ladies and gentlemen, about the Iran war was that once it started, we're all in. That's it. U.S. President Donald Trump repeated threats to destroy Iranian energy assets if the Strait of Hormuz isn't reopened soon, raising fears the war would escalate. Trump said the U.S. is in serious discussions with what he called a new regime in Iran to end military operations. And again, so we've got regime change already. The war's been won. What the fuck are we doing there? If we're talking to a new regime, I guess we're good then. Bye. But warned that if a deal isn't reached, the U.S. will blow up and completely obliterate all of Iran's electric generating plants, oil wells, and Karg Island. The conflict is threatening to cause severe economic damage around the world with the closure of the critical Hormuz waterway, choking supplies of energy, fertilizer, and other critical commodities. And again, fertilizer being one of the biggest keys because you can't run that stuff through a pipeline. And so you will see that increasing as a leverage point as well. And then let's see. The other one is the ever-growing dissent machine on the right-wing media sphere, and we'll see a bunch of this as the day goes on, where Megyn Kelly and she's trying to be a kinder, gentler Tucker, basically, and talking directly to the president, audience of wanting it. She has recognized that his ratings are ass. She posted this: 5-alarm fire. For the love of all that is holy, we need to get out of Iran and work full-time on people's money worries. The national poll. His approval is 33%, disapproval 62%. Trump approval rating, March 2026, 33.62. July 2025, 38.56. April 2025, 44.51. This is bottom of the barrel maggot approval. 32 is his absolute floor. That's just maggots. That's just MAGA identifying Republican voters and those that are adjacent and will not shake the the name because it lets the terrorists win over, until he's out of office. Once they're gone, there's probably about 6% that will just go forever. So the Republicans are staring. That's why they're bum rushing a lot of this shit through, is because they know this. They know that there is no situation where J.D. Vance or any of these other people can marshal the same kind of crowds that Trump did. And they know that that era is over, thank God. That apparently marks the president's lowest point of public support of either term in the White House, including the miserable 34% recorded in the immediate aftermath of the Jan 6 riots. He's a point below that. The college found that the president's net approval has plummeted on several key issues that otherwise formed the heart of his 2024 campaign. Negative 25 on immigration, negative 31 on jobs, negative 36 on tariffs, and thumping negative 47 on inflation. You want to talk about kitchen table issues, kids? That's it. And Democrats can simply run on, we were getting, we were hit with inflation caused by supply shock after COVID, and we were getting a handle on it. You can track it on its way down. And Donald Trump has just made the problem worse from day one because he doesn't really have a plan. His entire economic plan is, I don't like paying income taxes, so use tariffs to replace the income tax system so I never have to pay it again. And then put in tax breaks, like tax refunds that are for, material investment, so that even the stuff that I buy overseas, the largest, construction materials and equipment and that kind of stuff, when I buy it, I can write that off if I pay any other taxes. Or I can get free money from the government for buying that stuff and building things. They're going to pay me to build my buildings. That's what he's shooting for. Kelly's comments come Monday amid a growing chorus of anxiety among GOP ranks about the party's electoral prospects ahead of the November midterms. This would be she.
It's delightful to think about someone holding him to account for the lies he told that got us into this war. Stop with that. Is President Trump's decision. I'm aware, but someone talked him into it. And those people...
No, fuck you, lady. No. Someone talked him into it. He did it. What difference does it make? Other people having their own agendas is meaningless until you agree with their agenda and participate in it. Fuck off. Listen to this excuse.
It's delightful to think about someone holding him to account for the lies he told that got us into this war.
By the way,
stop with that. Is President...
She's talking about Netanyahu, by the way.
Trump's decision. I'm aware, but someone talked him into it. And those people should be held to account.
Yeah, this is elder abuse. We all know his brain is fucking cottage cheese. Why is anybody even allowing it's probably it's Susie Wiles' problem. She's probably the one that allows those calls to go through where he picks it up and he goes, yes, I will do whatever you want, baby. And he didn't even hang up the phone. He just drops it and starts walking towards the corner to yell, flatten Tehran out a window. Jesus.
As this thing goes south, we need to know exactly who talked him into it and what.
No, we don't. No. You know who talked him into it? He did. Because he heard people saying stuff, and then a little voice in his head, and a very little voice, a teensy tiny little mushroom tip voice, this big, told him in his own fucking, maybe it was RFK Jr.'s brainworm, told him in his own head, yeah, let's do this. I agree. That's who talked him in. You always talk yourself into it. And especially if you're the president of the fucking United States. Jesus Christ. Like, the amount of options available to the president of the United States, you're never really cornered.
Representations were made to convince the president that this was a good idea. Who? Who specifically? The names we know.
Who cares? Who cares? You dizzy bitch. This is obnoxious. He is responsible for his own decisions. He was not mesmerized. Nobody waved a fucking pocket watch in front of his face and made him count backwards from 10 as his body relaxed. And he, which nobody would do anyways, because the minute you actually get him to relax, it's just horrible. But it's amazing to me that they're still, this is the only way I guess they can do this. They have to cover this base with the maggotry that still supports him. is act like he couldn't have known. This is what Phil talks about with if the czar only knew. That it can't possibly be the czar. It can't possibly be the leader. It's the people around him. If he only knew how bad this was, he would do something about it. He just doesn't know.
No, are Bibi Netanyahu first and foremost. Lindsey Graham, equally to blame. We know
No, none of them are to blame. None of them are to blame. Donald Trump has the deciding capability and and multiple sources of information. He is a grown man. If he makes this decision, it's his fault. No one is like, how come you're not falling for what Lindsey Graham says? How come you're not falling for what Bibi Netanyahu says? I'm sure you heard the exact same shit. Right? I'm sure, you know, they're not saying something behind the scenes. They're not saying openly. That's what's been so blatant about all this stuff.
from the Wall Street Journal report that Mark Thiessen of Fox News and General Jack Keane were major advocates of the war. Okay, like those guys, but they appear to have been very wrong that this was a good idea. And
again, did they have a gun to his head? Are they blackmailing him? If so, why are you supporting someone who could be blackmailed so egregiously? I'm pretty comfortable saying that there is nothing in my entire life that I could be blackmailed on, much less blackmailed to the extent that I would send soldiers to die to cover my own ass. Or bomb a fucking school. So again, you supported this dickhead.
Could keep going. Mark Levin, chief among them. He says now, oh, it wasn't me. Every night on Fox News out there, urging the president to do this. And then he had a meeting with him in June where we know he denies it now. We know he pushed him for this. Ben Shapiro was out on his show every day pushing this war. Like there were.
Right, but they also pushed for other stuff they didn't get. Why this? And again, like, this is so fucking weak. How in the world do you intoxicate yourself with fear of Donald Trump so much that you have to act like he's a marionette?
Very prominent activists on the right who were practically frothing at the mouth for this thing. And now that it's not only going poorly, but the president's poll numbers are in a precipitous free fall.
Okay, yeah. Don't threaten me with a good time.
We'd love to see some accountability. Who promised?
Hey, I got an idea.
We're going to be appointing very pro-crime judges.
How about that guy?
Person, woman, man, camera, TV.
Yeah, how about him? How about you like, that's your guy, right?
Potatoes and chicken.
That guy.
Asked him what? And this is a great start, having the vice president speak directly to Bibi Netanyahu and say, you promised regime change was going to be easy.
That got me. That I was not expecting that. That's I don't know how she's trying to make JD Vance look tough and literally made him look like the stupidest possible person in the room entirely. Really? You're expecting JD Vance to say that? And it's going to have a response. Sorry. Again, well, real quick.
Ability. Who promised him what? And this is a great start, having the vice president speak directly to Bibi Netanyahu.
Also, who promised him what? Back up. Who promised him what? MBS promised him a live golf partnership golf courses and hotels in the Middle East in the very rich areas where they can sit empty and they can just buy him off, basically, that they can guarantee him an occupancy rate for a decade, even if nobody sets foot in the fucking thing. They'll launder money while he's in office using his crypto to guarantee him, the ability to shave tens of millions of dollars off the top of every transaction.
But the president's poll numbers are in a precipitous free fall. We'd love to see some accountability. Who promised him what? And this is a great start, having the vice president speak directly to Bibi Netanyahu and say, you promised regime change was going to be easy. You promised the Iranians were going to rise up in the streets and see it through. That hasn't happened.
Sorry, that's amazing. Like the idea that she's going to fix this for Trump and make him look like an innocent victim who was led astray, like the girl in Frankenstein who was led to the fucking riverbank so that he could toss her in like a flower.
Not good.
It's fucking pathetic. I mean, what else can we do?
Keep an eye out for the end times.
All right, okay.
And the United States is suffering as a result. And the report is that...
Yeah, but nobody could have seen that coming.
The response by the Israelis to our vice president doing that was to have a hit piece planted on J.D. Vance in an Israeli newspaper that is owned by American, but Israel first, mega donor Miriam Adelson. It's delightful to think about someone holding...
Hold on. Back here. There we go. Hold on. What is it?
The Israelis to our vice president doing that was to have a hit piece planted on J.D. Vance in an Israeli newspaper that is owned by American, but Israel first, mega donor Miriam Adelson.
It's not gonna occur to Meg and these other dipshits that Donald Trump is a grown man with agency who is the president of the United States and has access to information across the entire spectrum of intelligence. And yet somehow if he picks up the phone and on the other line, it's Bibi Netanyahu or Lindsey Graham, he goes into a trance and does whatever they want. At this point, I gotta say, I don't believe that he's easily hypnotized like that. Maybe it's a fetish. You know what I mean? Maybe do I have a? Let's see. I'm sure I do. Yeah. Maybe it's just you like what you like. Maybe this is his version of geopolitical pegging. But how are we supposed to distinguish between our leader and another country's leader if, well, I mean, I was going to say, if Joe Biden didn't seem to be cowed by this circumstance, we didn't attack then. Same thing under Obama. You think the system was different? One of the things that happens when they play all these montages of Bibi Netanyahu saying they're 2 weeks away from a weapon, that was all during the Obama administration too. Why didn't he take the bait? Right? Why did Obama not pick up the phone and Lindsey Graham was on the other line and he was just like, we've got to do it, And how are they able to fight off the mind ray, but Trump isn't? We're at the end of the show. It's been wonderful being with you this morning. And I want to, I'll be on this afternoon, of course, and we'll have plenty to cover. God knows. But I want to remind everybody to subscribe and all that kind of stuff. And with our earlier guests, I think it's important that we increasingly have guests on that I don't necessarily agree with, but are not opponents in the classical sense. The whole point isn't to get like debate clicks, but to actually have some sort of realistic conversation about the circumstance that we actually are in. I know it's not very popular. You're thinking, Hal, you're never going to get 1 million subs with, unless you're obscendiary and full of shit. And I'm like, I don't care. My reputation as a person who actually gives a damn is more important than that. I get it. But I do think we should be able to have, I can talk across the aisle and across the divide. And we'll do that to some extent, I suppose, at certain points in the future. But the purpose is that to get some real news in, available to you, and a recognition of the reality that we're in, as opposed to the painted story that you'll see. So I'm trying to do that for you. I'm trying to give you that option. And sometimes we will talk about uncomfortable topics. But I'm going to talk about them in a realistic way. And if you need somebody to blow smoke up your ass and tell you a story, there's plenty of stations out there that will do it. If you want to find America bad all the time and just put that stamp on everything, there's plenty of it out there. I'm not competing with that part of it. I'm trying to give you something unique here to add to your repertoire, to add an extra arrow to your quiver, so that when this stuff comes at you, you're making a realistic assessment of the world around us. So you and dark journalists are doing it. You want loyal fans that actually see a bigger picture. This is true. Absolutely. That's why the Sparklers are so awesome, because you guys care and it matters to you, and you make decisions based on reality. So anyways, love you guys. I will see you later. And until next time, it's wars and rumors of wars. It's just how it works. This is my current favorite AI slop song that I've written. The Celtics will be back, and the original will be there this afternoon. So look forward to that. Hit the like, share the show. Thank you guys so much.
Crown like cold winter light, scroll in hand, 7 seals, every word cuts and heals. Like drums, sword raised high, kingdoms come, peace unstitched by a single roar. I hear thunder at my door, wars and rumors of wars, spoken like a curse in the dark. Every headline, every scar is another cracked heart in the ark. Wars and rumors of wars, hey, echo from the prophets and seers. When the Lamb breaks the seal, all the old world shakes with our fears. Black horse ways, bread and bone, steel stilled hard, iron stone. Measure grain by a dying sun, silver short for everyone. Pale horse waits, eyes like ash, graves awake, tombs unlatched, Hades hangs on a trailing chain, every pulse spells your name. Wars and rumors of wars, spoken like a curse in the dark. Every headline, every scar's another cracked heart in the ark. Wars and rumors of wars, echo from the answer.